I don't know if Aurea, you want to talk? You're muted.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first session in day 6 of IRUD Summer Course 2022. First of all, before I start, I would like to remind all the students that the attendance will be monitored through the screen appearance. Therefore, it is mandatory for the students to turn the camera on and mute the microphone. Also, should any constraint be communicated to the LO or to this PIC, name with PIC_name. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let us introduce ourselves. My name is Aulia Aini.
And my name is Sukriwan Ramadan, and we are from Department of International Relations, Universitas Diponegoro, Indonesia.
Anyway, what a wonderful Monday, right, Sukri? How's your feelings for today?
Yes, such a wonderful Monday. I think it's perfect for supporting our daily activities. Therefore, I feel really great today. Thanks for asking, Al. How about you?
Glad to hear that. I'm good too. Thank you. By the way, we have so many friends here. I think before we start our agenda, let me greet one of our friends here. Okay, I think hello, Kak Laksita Agama. Good morning, Kak. How are you? How's your feelings for today's agenda in summer course?
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm good and have a nice day.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice day too, Kak Laksita. Okay, maybe the other one. Okay, hello, Mbak Dewi. How's your feelings for today? Yes, how's your
Hello,
feelings for today, Mbak?
Hello, Alia. It's nice to be here. And I can't wait for the wonderful sessions with Miss Feng Shi with a great topic also.
Okay, glad to hear that. I guess everyone's super excited for today's agenda, right, Sukri?
Yeah, we guess everyone here is good and excited to learn about today's topic. So let's begin with our agenda.
Today, we are going to be the host for this session, Global Environmental Policy, with the esteemed speaker, Mrs. Feng Wu, PhD, from University of New South Wales, Sydney. There are four agenda for today. They are introductions, material presentations, ice-breaking, Q&A, and closing session. Also, this session is going to be moderated by Mr. Muhammad Faik Adipratomo from the International Relations Department, Universitas Diponegoro.
Okay, for the operator, maybe you could help us to share the CV of Mr. Faik. Okay, Mr. Faik Adipratomo, SIP FSC, is the lecturer at International Relations Department, Universitas Diponegoro. He is a researcher with focus on terrorism, deradicalization, radicalization, women's rights, and nuclear safeguard. He obtained his bachelor degree majoring in international relations from Universitas Gadjah Mada, Indonesia, and he obtained his master degree majoring in strategic studies and focusing in terrorism studies from S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Singapore. Mr. Faik is strongly interested in research-based activism and being part of an organization which advocate police through research. Therefore, his experience involved around research. He began his research experience on 2017 by producing joint research paper on nuclear non-proliferation in the Korean Peninsula for the NEREC Young Fellow at KAIST University, Korea. In 2018, he joined Center for Indonesia Policy Studies, conducted research policy paper, and in 2019, he joined Kantor Staff President, conduct research on government policy. He also continued his journey for a couple years as research analyst at Bappenas and DPRD DKI Jakarta. His province also involved around religious violence, the religion violence, collective political violence, gender violence, and security in Southeast Asia, and hegemonic masculinity and aggregate entitlement. Throughout his journey, he has achieved several awards. In 2016, he became the paper presenter at International Conference on Feminism. In 2018 to 2019, he involved in dissertation track at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Singapore, with dissertation title, The Front Pembela Islam National Identity, Headspin and Demonization. In 2019, his poster in Understanding of Nuclear Weapon-Related Issue Among Practitioners in Indonesia has been accepted in CTBT Science and Technology Conference 2019 in Austria, and many more achievements to come.
Without further ado, let's start today's agenda. Mr. Faik, the time and screen are yours.
Hello everyone. Good morning. Thank you for attending today's session. Thank you for Professor Feng Shi Wu for wanting to deliver her materials. I will now proceed with the introduction to Professor Feng Shi Wu. Could the operator help by sharing her curriculum vitae? Thank you. So Professor Feng Shi Wu is an associate professor in the School of Social Sciences, the University of New South Wales, Sydney, from November 2019. She was previously a senior lecturer at the Asia Institute in the University of Melbourne from March 2018 to July 2019. She was an associate professor in S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, RSIS, in NTU, Singapore, from 2014 to 2018. She was also assistant and associate professor of the Department of Government and Public Administration, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, or CUHK, from 2005 to 2014. She was the courtesy-affiliated faculty member of the Asian School of Environment in NTU Singapore from 2015 to 2018, and the External Research Associate, East Asia Institute, National University of Singapore from 2016 to 2018. She was also the visiting scholar in the Harvard Yenching Institute from 2008 to 2009, and the project director and dissertation fellow for Sustainable Forest and Climate Change, the Global Environmental Institute in Beijing, funded by the Blue Moon Foundation in 2004. Her education is an MA and PhD in Political Science, the Department of Government and Politics, University of Maryland, USA, 1999 to 2005, with the dissertation title of Double Mobilization, Transnational Advocacy Networks of China's Environment and Public Health. She had a BA major in International Relations, first honor, in Beijing University, China in 1995 till 1999, where her graduate thesis was an international relations analysis of the 1998 Asian financial crisis. Professor Feng Shiwu's main research interests include environmental politics, comparative and Chinese politics, civil society and political transition, social forces and non-state actors in global governance. She has received a variety of awards and honors, including the UNSW ADA Faculty Fellowship in 2021 to 2022, the CUHK Global Scholarship Program for Research Excellence, the visiting scholar for the Harvard Yenching Institute and Harvard University, graduate fellow of the American Academy of Political and Social Sciences, and a PhD scholarship and Harrison Fellow in the University of Maryland. She has published a large number of monographs, books, and peer-reviewed journal articles, among which the monograph Environmental Activism and Political Liberalization in Asia, and edited special journal issues and books, including China's early response to COVID-19, evolving mutual embeddedness, state-society relations in China, and authored a large number of peer-reviewed academic journal articles, the most recent of which was From Online Mass Incidents to Defiant Enclaves, Political Dissidents on China's Internet. So, Professor Feng Shiwu, we have read a representative of your CV, and we would welcome you to please share your presentation and your materials. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Farid. I think we missed each other for maybe a couple of months. You did your master at Rajratan School?
Yes.
Which degree?
I took strategic studies, Professor.
Excellent. I want to make sure, sometimes my voice doesn't go well with Zoom. Can you all hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you well, Professor.
And it's not coming in and out. It's very consistent.
Yes,
Thank you.
It's very consistent.
Yes. If the voice becomes less clear or it becomes very low, please let me know. And I see if I could adjust. I'll wear a headset.
We will, thank you.
Problem. Okay, you want me to share screen, isn't it? All right, just a second. So thank you very much for such a well-organized beginning. Thank you, Farid, and also our MC too. I guess the MCs are students.
They are.
And I like your practice of asking around and see how people are doing for today. That's very, very nice. And I can see a few of you, V and Dundee, I guess, but not all of you. So if you don't mind, don't be too shy, especially when it's discussion time. I hope to have more cameras on. Throughout pandemic, we have learned to use Zoom, but a lot of times we would end up talking to the screen to ourselves. It's okay, but could be better. So thank you very much for such a warm welcome. And I also am very excited about today's lecture. I look forward to our exchanges and discussions as well. I really am interested in learning your feedback, your thinking about global environmental politics, climate change politics, and more importantly, Indonesia, the role to be played by Indonesia, which is a critical country, a critical member of the planet, and critical to the future of global climate change. So it's really wonderful that we have this opportunity to spend a couple of hours together and think seriously the linkage between climate change and, more importantly, the political dynamics behind the big performance of climate change politics and the linkage with Indonesia. All right. You all see the slides well?
Yes, Professor.
Good. So when I was invited to this summer course, I had a conversation with Bulati, and she was thinking about more broadly global environmental politics. When I was in the process of preparing, I've been working in the field of global environmental politics for 2 decades, and I think it's growing so big. It covers all the way from biodiversity to deep seabed conservation to tropical forests to pollution. It's just massive. So I suggested, why don't we have a little bit narrowed focus, and we could just get a bit more depth into the climate field instead of just a very generic introduction of different sectors. If we could actually have a bit of focus, a bit of a depth, maybe I think the learning outcome would be better. So therefore, we're going to only looking at the climate field, which probably is the most popular environmental field across the globe, especially for young generation. Your generation grown up with the awareness, consciousness, and basic knowledge of climate. 20 years ago, when I started teaching climate-related courses to undergrads or master students, I have to do a much longer introduction. I have to explain what is all the greenhouse gas, what are the different main sources of these, what's the simple mechanisms of so-called greenhouse effects, and what's the difference between global warming and global climate change. So I think but 20 years later, 2022, I don't think I need to do such an extensive introduction. Most of you probably have been hearing about it all the way along, since probably middle school, high school. And by now, you probably have a basic understanding. And the whole change is because the politics and policymaking behind we will be able to discuss that next few slides. The world has changed, not just the weather patterns, but the collective consciousness. Our awareness of the change, of the physical, the changes in the biophysical world has changed. A lot more policy advocacy has already happened at the global level, at the national level, at the local level. This consciousness change is not just happening at the global level within UN meetings or big COP meetings, no, but it has really happened at the state level as well as community. So today, we're not just having a first encountering of the topic. Majority of the young generations of this planet are much more aware of not just the physical dynamics of climate change, but the policy languages. So this is the big background. And I think that's why I think it would be very meaningful to talk about it with you. And I looked at the overall program design. I guess in the next few days, we will have another lecture, which will talk a lot more about carbon emission. So hopefully this course also can serve as a good dialogue between the topics you've covered so far, which has a more topical sort of thematical focus on Indonesia's environment policy making, Indonesia's local wisdom, which is great. I think it's a very brilliant way to design this whole summer program. And later you will have other, I think you've talked about environment activism as well as carbon emission policies. So hopefully this course also fit into the overall design and thinking of the summer. So we will have, and also feel very comfortable in terms of raising your hand or push the button. You know how to use Zoom. I'm sure everybody knows how to do Zoom right now. Let me know if you have any kind of questions. I can always pause. We don't have to just go all the way for 1 hour. You can pause and address your questions along the way. And Australia, we have now, by now, have a very good tradition of opening any formal meetings, similar to what you guys did by asking each other, how are you doing today? What we do is we do an acknowledgement. We pause for 30 seconds and we reflect on the history and background of Australia, particularly the colonial invasion of the First Nations land. So I would do mine. I live and work on the unceded sovereign land of the Bidjigal land. They're part of the Eora people's country, and it's on the eastern coast of the continent. The unique sandy terrains system here were very critical to keep mine and my family upbeat during those lockdown days, 20 and 2020. We were very, and we're still very grateful to the First Nation people, particularly their sustainable and traditional custodian ways of protecting the land, the climate system, the ecosystem. And I think there's a great deal to learn from them. There's great depth in terms of the local knowledge, local wisdom from the First Nation people in this continent, as well, I think, as in other parts. For my lecture, there's 3 components. First, I will go through a bit of the historical background of global climate governance and politics. Climate politics started in late 1970s. Of the past 50 years, much has happened. What I will do is to highlight the difference between the Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is the most recent and the current umbrella international document that sets the basic tone for climate politics and governance right now. Before the Paris Agreement, we had a different international document. And as a result, we had a different set of principles and mentalities and guidelines and practical guidelines. So I want to highlight this shift. This shift is not the whole history, but really highlights the ups and downs and turbulences or very dramatic history of the past 20 years. It's one example of how much could have shifted and have shifted related to climate politics, the global level, which has tremendous implications for each country and lots of communities. So the first part, we do a bit of a historical talk, and I highlight a few major changes for you to think about the complex background of the current global climate politics. Second part, I will highlight a few theoretical approaches, few international relations theoretical approaches. You are all students of international relations. And I have been informed that you're quite well versed in terms of international relations theories. And we're here to discuss climate politics, environmental politics, not just in a very generic sense. We're here to discuss it from the international relations perspective. So we're not just here to discuss the environmental aspect of these issues. We're here also to be able to learn a few things about international relations and theoretical thinking of these issues. Last and not least, I would like to open it up and have your view on the issue of the role of Indonesia and what can be learned, what should be learned, what should be highlighted for Indonesians when we think about and discuss global climate politics. The climate is relevant to every country, every community almost, even every species. But what is unique in terms of the relationship with Indonesia? What's the unique challenges Indonesia faces when fighting the changes brought up by dramatic climate change? What is unique for Indonesian young people when you think about the future for the climate? So hopefully we have enough time left towards the end. We have a good discussion. Any questions so far? Any comments? Okay, thank you for giving me some signal and letting me know that you're fine with it. Political history. As I indicated, it has been quite a while for global leaders, social leaders, environmentalists, and the youth to think about and talk about and act on climate-related issues. It has been quite a while. It's not just overnight. It's been at least 5 decades. Early policy advocacy by the epistemic communities, particularly targeting UN specialized agencies, because by 1970s, the UN has already started the formation of a special environmental agency known as UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program. So since then, environmental scientists, climatologists, experts have targeted these UN agencies to raise alarm about potential climate changes ahead. Now, there is a concept called epistemic communities, which is very interesting and relevant for any students of international relations. Epistemic communities are networks of scientists, policy experts, and technocrats who share cognitive principles and practical philosophy. Because of their scientific training background, even though they're coming from different countries, different cultures, they share the basic understanding of science. Probably they're believers. The practitioners of science for sure, and I think they subscribe to scientific philosophy of science. And I do believe the meaning of science in policymaking. And they believe the value of scientific knowledge as guiding principles or guiding information for the policy. So there are lots of such networks, even back in 1970s. Now, many of you are born you're born in the new millennium. When I talk about 1970s, you probably think, oh my goodness, that sounds very, very, very far away. Long time ago. It has been. Politically speaking, it was a different era. The reason is it was the peak of Cold War. What is Cold War? It's not just that the war was cold. It was more because it was before globalization. It was when the world was deeply divided according to ideological lines. What does that mean? It means trade doesn't go across this line. Tourism doesn't go this line. Teaching materials do. A lot of times, international politics is deeply divided. Nevertheless, even in the 1970s, there were scientific communities, epistemic communities, when people with very different backgrounds, scientists with very different backgrounds, they did meet and they shared their visions and their understanding of what was going on with the planet. Because there were already some early advocacy, policy advocacy in the 1970s, mostly driven by scientists and networks of science at the UN level. And as I said, starting the alarm of dramatic changes the following. 1992 was a remarkable year in the whole history of global environmental politics. It was a critical year. It marked the beginning of at least a decade of significant increase of environmental collaborations and signing of environmental agreements, and a critical decade for global collaboration in the field of climate. Noise possible, thank you. 1992, the Cold War had formally finished. And United Nations had its first large conference in Latin America, Southern American continent. It was significant for the entire Latin American community. The real conference was joyful, big success. I would argue one of the biggest success in the entire international relations history in terms of collaboration. And participants of the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development agreed on many things, including Agenda 21, including the UNFCCC, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, was first negotiated in 1992, formally went into force before, with 197 signatories. Very few global agreements have such a smooth start, with such a great support from such a huge majority of sovereign countries. Very few, very few. A lot of agreements start with maybe 50, 70, and gradually would accumulate signatures above 100. The UNFCCC had a very happy beginning. And the COPS, Convention, the Convention of Parties, COPS meaning Convention of Parties, means the signatory countries or members of the UNFCCC. They decided to meet annually, which again is very significant. You studied any kind of international organization, international agreements, have some basic introduction of international governance. These are all incredible. Not all agreements have so-called a COPS, Convention of Parties, annually. It's a huge amount of investment, human investment, financial investment, time investment, huge amount of administrative effort to ask close to 200 countries to meet, to send delegations annually and to sit down to talk about one single issue. Next one is coming up in November in Cairo, the first time. I think. Very important. The most recent one last year was in Glasgow. A lot happened, lots of interesting dynamics, protests outside, interesting conversations inside. It has been, so the current one in Egypt would be the 27th. A lot of time. So the early advocacy started in 1970s, and we already have formal structure of global climate governance since early 1990s. And starting from 1995, we have had almost close to 200 formal delegations to meet together annually for 27 years. A decent history as global governance. 1997, again, things moved really fast in 1990, very fast. People were very committed to it. These are incredible progress in terms of global governance. A particular document was agreed in Kyoto, Japan, known as the Kyoto Protocol. It's called a protocol, which means it's a manual. It's a pragmatic manual for action. Protocol goes into great details in terms of how to implement the UNFCCC. It's a very pragmatic, practice-oriented document. Wants to give as detailed as possible guidelines for all these countries who have put their hands up, promised in front of the world that they are going to do something. That's Kyoto Protocol. Again, impressive, very impressive document. Impressive sort of getting together commitment by so many countries at the global level. Almost unheard of. Today when we talk about it, we take all of these things for granted. But in 1997, that was incredible. That was almost the first time in the whole history of our entire world that so many countries decided to commit to one thing. In the entire, before World War II, of course, when we say internationally, when it mostly meant European countries decided to do something. When they talk about global peace meetings, it was just, a dozen or 20 European countries. By 1997, it's really the whole world. Unfortunately, but nobody expected it. The mood was so upbeat and positive in 1997 in Kyoto, Japan. Very positive, promising, optimistic. But very quickly, that changed. And by 2008, even though Kyoto Protocol has its own life up until 2012, but by 2008, majority of the parties who signed up for Kyoto Protocol became pessimistic. And they already started talking about, give it up, started talking about post-Kyoto. We need a new document. The whole mechanism is problematic. A lot more resistance, criticism. And here we go. By 2015, I have a new document, brand new principle, almost all. And I will tell you more about that. Yes. So this is a very brief, very brief, 10 minutes sort of history. I said a lot has happened. The climate used to be a very top level, elite type of conversation. But I think by now, majority of the society, particularly young people, do have good sense of what it is. The whole field has expanded from epistemic communities, scientists, to top elites, to national elites, to communities, to experts, and now a huge amount of climate politics are driven by the young generation. And I'm sure you know some of them. You might even be one of them in your own community. I'm invited to be speaking at a student-led conference in 2 weeks. It's the annual UNSW ASEAN conference. It's driven by students. And I'm going to speak at the roundtable on climate politics. And the student who ran that roundtable actually is an Indonesian young student. He graduated from Indonesia and came to UNSW to pursue his master's degree. And he is very knowledgeable about the issue, and he now is a champion of climate advocacy at UNSW. So a lot of things now are being driven by you. This is an example of the early important report for those of you who might decide to specialize in global environment politics for your master's degree. In 1987, a very important report called Brundtland Report, which is the first report conceptualized this thing called sustainability. A lot of the languages included in that report continue to be used for today. So the next 10 minutes, I'm going to focus on the shift and all the important changes from Kyoto Protocol to Paris Agreement. Many of my students know a lot more about Paris Agreement because it's the current dominant agreement. That's the current international document for the entire field. But I always argue, without knowing the Kyoto Protocol, we do not appreciate enough how different, how unique, and what Paris Agreement means. Without knowing a little bit of the history, we don't know why contemporary is different. Without knowing a bit of the failure of the Kyoto Protocol, we wouldn't understand the most important dynamics of our current. We need to know what failed in terms of the Kyoto principle. Only we get a sense of that, we can understand why Paris Agreement might have a chance, or maybe not. The ambition has changed. I don't know if the world live up to it. Kyoto Protocol, negotiated, successfully agreed upon by 1997, was discussed in a different era. 1990s was a decade celebration. In certain parts, in Indonesia, 1998 was significant. Indonesia, after 1998, entered a different era in terms of politics as well. a new era for democracy, for political participation. Students also poured into the streets in Jakarta, as well as many other people committed themselves to say no to an old-fashioned political structure and demanded for major fundamental changes in Indonesian politics. At the global level, it was also an era of change. The European Union was formed in 1994. Soviet Union collapsed, 26 new countries emerged in former Soviet Union space as well as in former Yugoslavia. We see a lot of governments fell in Africa and new governments were formed. It's an era of change. It's an era of hope because finally this deep divide, this very solid so-called Iron Curtain is lifted. People are able to travel now more freely. There was also a decade of so-called international information technology leap. We have a new thing called www. And a new thing called World Wide Web. Eventually will change how we live, how we think about information, how we socialize today. It was a decade of massive fundamental technological advancement, social change, political change. In the rooms of international negotiations, in the 1990s, one of the dominant ideas is that called a common but differentiated responsibility. The new idea is that developing world should be equal partners of negotiation, and the world should listen carefully what the needs are from the developing side. Yes, we face a very challenging future in terms of climate change, ecological degradation. At the same time, we need to acknowledge that developing countries here have different demands and needs. 1990s promised developing countries also a bright future for development. Because finally, we can have development assistance flowing across ideological divides. Finally, we don't have to worry about a nuclear global war. Very heavy weight crowd hanging on top of our head. Finally, we could take a break from that. And developing countries were promised with a brighter future with economic growth. So yes, we have common responsibilities, but we also need to appreciate developing countries and developed countries have slightly different tasks. That was the dominant narrative and mentality back in. This principle has huge implications. I'm just going to tell you a little bit more. The history of it. It's also not just started in 1990s. It was also promoted by the non-alignment movement, of which Indonesia was a major party. The non-alignment movement started in 1950s, never went away, still active. In 1950s, the first founding president in the modern Indonesia, Sukarno, was one of 7 main leaders who started non-alignment movement. The whole point is that we're not socialist, we're also not capitalist. We're in the middle. We're independent. We have our own mind, and we will develop independent foreign policies. We're not going to ally with America. We also are not going to ally with Soviet Union. That was the whole point of non-alignment for 77 developing countries. And that history led to the formation of the common but differentiated responsibility principle. And by the time of Kyoto Protocol, that principle was very well endorsed. The main focus was that there is now a new divide. It's not an ideology. It's no longer an ideological divide. It's a north-south divide. It's a divide more objectively determined and assessed based on economics, based on poverty level, based on average income, GDP per capita, based on the percentage of girls who enroll into schools, based on the percentage of women who participate in workforce. These are more objective criteria, and these criteria together differentiate the world by two categories. Some of the countries on this planet by 1990s have achieved more in terms of economic and development goals. However, other countries would like to do that as well, would like to feed their people better, would like to have more girls enrolled in schools, would like to have enough hospitals and clinics to provide basic health services to rural residents, would like to provide young people with job opportunities, would like to have more internet cafes and infrastructures, would like to have better electricity grid, better shipyards, better highways. These are the basic demands of the developing world. And there are concrete implications of this principle. So because of this narrative mentality and principle, the first direct implication is that there's, as I said, two categories of countries. And for the Kyoto Protocol, they even made it more explicit, made it less abstract, made it more pragmatic, is to say there are countries, about 50, called Annex 1. And basically, conceptually, they are developed countries. And non-Annex 1, the rest of the world, are developing world. And it's OECD 19 plus countries with economies in transition, Russia and New Zealand. These are technical definitions for some of you who are interested in the concrete sort of division of all the members who signed up for Kyoto Protocol. So Annex 1 and non-Annex 1, more advanced countries and less advanced. And Kyoto Protocol diagnosis of the problem and the solution to this problem is that we have economically more advanced countries, as they will do more help with the climate. Partially because they were the traditional emitters of carbon emissions. In human history, they've emitted more carbon-related gases than the less developed countries. These countries, particularly OECD countries, have gone through waves and waves of industrialization. They have higher amount of automobiles, they have higher amount of energy facilities, and they emit more carbon-related gases. And they have a commitment to the less developed countries. And they have a commitment to reduce their own carbon emissions. And they have a second commitment is to help developing countries to face climate-related, carbon-related challenges. So Kyoto Protocol sees the climate challenge is universal, but the solutions, the big chunk of the responsibility lying with developed or OECD. Put it simple. Now, fast forward, Paris Agreement, 2015, close to 20 years later, only 2 decades, world is different. Major difference, the world has entered, so-called post-1990s so-called jubilee. The world has become less peaceful. A major issue, so-called 9/11. 9/11 is a single event, but the responses and the consequence has led to a series of events. America's so-called global war on terror has led to major invasions of Middle Eastern countries, Islamic countries, has pushed or backfired in a sense. We saw a fast radicalization Islam as a religion, as a response to the drastic sort of crush, discrimination. Islam and Muslims in many countries, domestic politics, which has driven multiple invasions, also has partially contributed to civil war in Syria, led to millions and millions of refugees. It has been quite turbulent 15 and 20 years after 9/11. By 2015, the world has shifted its focuses. The momentum, the positive momentum has been lost. Negativity has grown in Eastern Europe, and also the relationship between Russia and the West has deteriorated dramatically after 2008. NATO continued to try to expand eastward, really antagonized the Russian government, made the Russian government feel very insecure. More importantly, in terms of economic development, including Indonesia, including a couple of Indonesia's neighbors, leading developing countries did pretty good in terms of economic growth. And all of a sudden, these leading developing countries have become major contributors to global carbon emissions. And that altogether has made Kyoto Protocol unsuitable as the leading guiding document for the world. And discourse changed. The pushback from OECD countries, the pushback from the United States to not acknowledge differentiated responsibility and to impose or advocate, really emphasize it. In terms of climate, everybody is a victim and everybody is guilty. Nobody is less guilty anymore. And no one can say no to climate responsibilities. So for Kyoto Protocol, developing country, majority, almost all developing countries had zero commitment to carbon reduction. By 2015, that is gone. Now, most people think it was targeted at China. It was not just targeted at China, it was also India, Brazil, and Indonesia, Nigeria, and South Africa. These are leading developing countries, no longer exempted from carbon responsibility. By the time of Paris Agreement, the mood, the mentality, the discourse has shifted. It's a very different discourse. The world is no longer divided. When facing climate change, the world is no longer divided as Annex 1 or non-Annex 1. No. Everybody is guilty and everybody is suffering. And I will give you more data to support that argument. But nevertheless, it's an argument. It's being resisted still, but that's not the argument, big argument behind Paris Agreement. No more dichotomous distinction. A lot of countries still refer themselves, I'm developing countries, I'm developed, but doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you're developing countries or not, you've got to commit to some sort of carbon reduction goals. And immediately, the pragmatic mechanisms also changed. For Kyoto Protocol, it was mostly a market-driven mechanism, using market mechanism to encourage developed countries, OECD countries, to support development, to transform technology, to translate and transform technologies and to share technologies with developing countries. Also to provide climate assistance. That was the main point, is to use market-based mechanisms to create sovereign climate funds to encourage companies from developed world to go to developing countries, to help them to plant trees, to help them to develop hydropower, to support developing countries' governments, to implement carbon sink projects, and to purchase carbon reduction credits, to use market mechanism to encourage developed countries to support developing countries. Throughout this process, we will have an outcome of carbon reduction and financial support flow. So it's a sort of a double-sided agenda for Kyoto Protocol. Yes, the result will be reduction of carbon emission, but throughout the process, developing country will receive financial support, technological transfer from developed countries, so that a lot of green projects will happen in the developing world with the support from OECD. Fast forward, under Paris Agreement, the emphasis is no longer such transfer of finance or technology. The emphasis is that everybody go back to your community, go back to your country, go back to your national policy process. Set up a goal that you think it's reasonable for you to reach for the next 5 years. It's called intended nationally determined contribution. Every single party, if you subscribe to this issue called climate change, you put your hands up, you sign this Paris Agreement, you go back and talk to your own constituency, your representatives, and have your national laws passed, and set up your national goals for the next 5 years. In Indonesia, you assess yourself, what's the baseline, what you want to do. But you need to have that goal. Every single country needs to do that. And then report back to the UN. The top-down oversight by the UN. The United Nations no longer champions transfer of knowledge, technology, and finance, but the UN will sit on top and receive these reports and monitor the progress of all member countries. So the whole Paris Agreement relies on self-reporting, target setting, dynamic process, science-based policymaking, and universal requirements and standards. So for now, it's a universal game. Everyone measures yourself, and everyone will be assessed and monitored universally. So what the UN will do to the United States will be the same to Indonesia, except Indonesia sets your own targets, your own goals, and the United States sets your own goals and your targets. The UN comes in is just to see whether each country live up to their own promise. Instead of asking developed countries to transfer knowledge and technology and funds. The Paris Agreement created a global climate fund that is open for everybody to apply. The promise was 100 billion. I don't want to, but this might be a good time to sort of wake up everyone. But guess how much has been raised? Anybody have a rough guess?
10 billion maybe, Professor?
You think 10%? Let me see if I
10%
have it.
hopefully.
So this is a side note. So that has been promised in 2015. About 7-8 years later, only 1%. 1%. Very small amount of money has been truly raised. It's far from enough. Far from enough. So Kyoto Protocol wanted developed countries to voluntarily transfer some knowledge, some technology, and some fund to developing world, but not for free. As a result, they get market access, they get some benefits out of it. Now, Paris Agreement decided we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to set up a centralized fund, which opens for everyone. Majority of the sad truth is that majority of least developed countries don't even have the capacity to apply for funds, to be credited enough. You know, you're a good borrower or you're a good applicant. You need lots of expertise. You can read the application form. You will understand what I'm talking about. It's not that easy to get grants from that. So to summarize, traditional developed countries remain under Kyoto Protocol and back in 1990s, early 2000s. Global climate change politics can be summarized as such. Traditional developed countries remain as biggest emitters, sort of guilty, right? Guilty is pronounced. It's possible to work with the existing economic energy model, the existing one for back in 1990s, to mitigate, to slow down climate change dynamics. And also the marketing mechanism can facilitate such transfer and sharing of best grain. Now moving to Paris Agreement, late 2010s and the beginning of 2020s. Everyone is in this together, both as emitters and the victim. More and more countries, including developed countries, are becoming biggest victims or experiencing most climate impacts. Mitigation now seems to be insufficient. Very tragic. We are not taking this serious enough. This means a lot. Back in 1990s, we thought we can just do a few things, you know, we can reduce carbon emissions. Boom, China, India, Brazil, Indonesia, all developed fast. Vietnam, South Africa, Kenya, West Africa. We are all developing. Mitigation is not fast enough. In fact, many countries are talking about complete relocation of their citizens. Many so-called, you know, a lot of time people think, oh, that's Maldives. I don't know if any of you have ever seen a very good picture of the Prime Minister of Maldives at the first underwater cabinet meeting. He asked all his ministers to wear swimming suits, and these scuba diving suits have an oxygen tank on their back. They're sitting around a desk underwater to alarm the whole world that if we don't do anything, that's the future. Everybody will be working in underwater. It's no longer fictional movies. It's the reality many Pacific Island countries are thinking about every day. But I would say it's not just the Pacific Island countries, Southeast Asia. It's countries similar, such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, because significant part of the country are islands. Sea level rise is no longer fictional movie. Every country is in this, and every country has to act, and mitigation is not enough. Adaptation has to be rolled out. Market mechanisms are also not enough or effective, and we need other mechanisms. But do we have enough mechanisms other than marketing mechanisms? That's a question. Can we rely on top-down monitoring by UN? This is a question I want you to think. The moment Paris Agreement became open for signature, we have American election. We had a very conservative government in America, very inward-looking, pulled America out of Paris Agreement in 2016, which America itself might not be the single player in climate politics anymore, but nevertheless, America's normative power is there. And because of Trump, there's a lot of conservative movements around the world. Most recent, even a right-wing party has got into power in Sweden. When we think about Sweden, peace-loving, social democrat country. In fact, the Social Democrat Party has dominated Swedish politics since 1920. Then it's unthinkable. The opposite party now is going to be dominant in Swedish politics. The conservative mentality is very popular, inward looking. So can we, with inward looking sort of mentality means that countries do not believe in UN. Countries are suspicious of global collaboration. Countries would like to become so-called self-dependent. Not being an active and committed party of global governance. This is the moment when the world needs UN to be strong, to be very, very effective in leading global governance. We have conservative politics going around. We have pandemic, and now we have a major conflict, war in eastern part of Europe. And major countries, including US, NATO, Russia, and China, are thinking about hard war. The world is global governance is very interrupted. This is the moment we need the world rallying around the UN, but in fact, the world is quickly sliding into conflict mentality, untrusting, distrusting mode. This is sort of opposite trend. This is the moment when all countries should be listening to UN Secretary General every day. But instead, if you open news every day up until Queen Elizabeth's funeral, before that, every day is Ukraine crisis. So we're in a very tricky moment of history. I don't know how much we could really rely on top-down monitoring. So I've already talked a lot about this shift. And before I move on to IR, I think maybe all of us deserve 5 minutes break. What do you think, Ari?
Yes, definitely.
Should we have 5 minutes just to break, everybody stretch their legs and think about what we've spoken so far? We've spoken quite a lot, and I hope I wasn't too fast. I hope I haven't lost the audience. You can type in your questions into the chat if you want. Give me some feedback, or even you can say, I like it. Type something, or use Zoom, give me some feedback. And we have a 5 minutes break, and then we will continue.
So yeah, hello everyone. I guess for each of you who want to take the break, you can take the break for 5 minutes, and we could continue at 11:18. Okay, see you. Hello everyone, and Mrs. Feng Xiwu. I think our break time is over, so maybe we can continue to learn the topics together with Mrs. Feng Xiwu. Thank you.
Thank you. Just 1 second. Sorry, I just wanted to drink some water before I start again. Thank you, Farik, for the comment. I was just reading it. Do I get any other responses from the audience? Any other just reactions? Questions? Yes, Farik, do you want to say something as well?
I wanted to have a question, but I think it's better if we give the questions at the end of the
Towards
presentation.
the end, okay, can do that.
Yeah.
So, IR, international relations, how to explain these, how to explain such a shift and relate the field more to first, a little bit extra information. As I said, so I presented political shift. So I'm now going to present a couple of contextual shifts, and then I present a couple of explanations. This is 1990s. Probably can't. Can you see my arrows? Can you see my mouse move? Okay. So 1990s. This is when Kyoto Protocol was being negotiated. And this is United States. This is EU, green one. They're certainly bigger, significantly bigger emitters of the carbon emission. And this is, the red one is China, blue one is Russia, Japan. This is India. So these couple of countries, yes, they're significant, but cannot be compared to the United States or Europe. Now, fast forward, this is 2005, 2003 to 2005. You can see a bit of increase from the China side. I remember that 2003, I was a PhD student at University of Maryland, and I was working as a research assistant for a think tank in Washington, D.C., who provides policy recommendations on energy issues to the departments, the United Governments, federal government. 2003, the major prediction of China's energy consumption, as well as energy capacity and the contribution to climate change, was like, in about 20 years, that's 2003, the expectation was that in 20 years, 2023, China will surpass the US. Okay. So the prediction was 20 years. But the real surpassing happened within 7 years. That's the point, or 5. By 2009, China surpassed China as the largest emitter. This, you can tell, came as a huge shock, not an earthquake. Policy makers, you prepare your policy. You can't change everything overnight. So you're preparing. You're preparing a scenario that China will surpass US in 2023, but suddenly you're facing a reality that China is already ahead of you. So that was a major change in the real sort of the physical ground in terms of the contextual background of climate change, is that suddenly United States or EU no longer are the largest emitters, and China really was shooting to the roof. Also, what was not really expected is that they were expecting the developing world would go something like this, the dotted line, or something like this. But you can see that the entire developing world, which includes Indonesia, also carbon emission from the entire developing world also dramatically increased. It's not just China, but the second largest increase in terms of emission are from the entire developing world. India didn't really take off until the story of India really has to wait for another 15. Probably towards 2015, India has a big emission jump. But the developing world together and China really made OECD countries start shaking their head, saying, we're not the biggest emitter, and there's no way we're going to continue to transfer funds to the developing world for them to reduce carbon emissions. They've got to do it themselves. The demand is so big that there's no way we could fund the whole thing. So this is a critical period of time when you see sharp rise of carbon emissions by China as well as developing. And this is the 2020 carbon emission complex. China's 28, United States shrink to 15. India, as I said, after 2015, become much more significant. This is now, India emits half of the total carbon emission of the United States. And Europe is yellow together. So India alone emits the equal amount of emissions as the entire European continent. That's significant. Asia together, I think Indonesia 2%, that's not small. As a single country, that's not small. So Asia together is significant. These are all in Asian countries. So Asia together is almost half of the entire emission. Rest of the world, those are African countries and Latin American countries. No, not Latin America is blue. These are mostly African countries. And yeah, the Middle East is part of Eurasia or not? No, Middle East is included in Asia. So this is mostly Africa. So not small. We have to say also not small anymore. 21%, more than America. So these are the changes. These are the so-called physical changes in the physical world, or in a sense, bit of the so-called energy science to justify Paris Agreement. Now, the other side is so-called vulnerability side. So we're talking about the contribution to climate change, and then we will have to talk about who are affected most, who will suffer the most, who will be negatively impacted by climate change the most. When I started teaching climate politics in undergrad classrooms in early 2000s, not only I have to explain the scientific mechanisms of greenhouse gases, I usually will pull out a map and talk about who will suffer the most. Now, the science, predictions, climatology predictions back then were very different. The scientific consensus back then is sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa and the Caribbean countries will suffer the most, be negatively impacted most by climate change. This is almost into 2013, 2014. The data goes all the way to 2013, and it was released in 2014. So by the time when countries are discussing about Paris Agreement, new science highlighted a new group of countries that will be negatively affected by climate change, using a different types of indicators. So this is a table lists the top 10 countries most affected from 1994 to 2013, 20 years, in terms of disasters, death toll, death per 100,000. This is absolute death toll. This is rate. Total loss in terms of economic loss, loss per GDP, and number of climate disasters. Honduras, Caribbean, Myanmar, Southeast Asia, Haiti, Caribbean, Nicaragua, Caribbean, Central American, Philippines, Southeast Asia, Bangladesh, South Asia, Vietnam, Southeast Asia, Dominican, Guatemala, Caribbean, Latin America, Pakistan, South Asia. So the image already shifted. We don't have sub-Saharan African countries on the list. We have instead a newcomer. Bad news for us here today. A new region emerged as the most vulnerable, climate vulnerable regions on the planet, Southeast. Most countries, by now, 2022, we know pretty sure most Southeast Asian countries will be negatively impacted to a great degree. Myanmar, southern part of Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh City was projected now to be submerged very soon. There will be huge floods. Jakarta, same, is both sinking and having seawater intrusion. So Ho Chi Minh City is not sinking, but have seawater intrusion. But Jakarta is both sinking. Jakarta used to be known as the converging point of many, many rivers. That's what the meaning of Jakarta, as much as I know. Maybe I'm reading different materials, but in the language, Jakarta means where the rivers meet, which means the soil is very moisturized. With all the high rises, no wonder it's sinking. And together with intrusion. Now that's 2013 data. What I'm going to show you probably will make you even more. Now this is 2020 data. The new list of top 10 countries being negatively affected by climate. Now we have Japan, which is nobody expected that. Philippines is quickly moving up to the list, which is evidenced by the increasing storms and hurricanes and typhoons. These Typhoon Haiyan led to collective hunger strike at COP meeting. Was the chief negotiator from the Philippines government gave a very emotional speech. Towards the end, he broke down in tears, which was very echoed by all the environmental experts and the elite and the activists. So in the middle of that COP meeting, many people joined him. He promised he will go on hunger strike until the conference come to a conclusion about actions. And he did that, and many, many other negotiators joined him. It was extraordinary how these negotiators did put their life on risk to pressure the global community to move fast. Germany, another shocking country on this list, but Germany increasingly is suffering from floods, heat waves. It's also on top of the list. Madagascar, now we have one. India is a new one. We used to have only Bangladesh, but if the moment you have India on any list, the magnitude of human loss is evident. Sri Lanka, another very vulnerable country. Kenya, a second, and third, Rwanda, all these African countries. Canada, another shocking name on the list, because the wisdom back in 1990s was that Canada and Australia will never suffer. They will benefit. Canada, Russia, and Australia will benefit. Particularly Canada and Russia, because they finally will have more arable land, and their agriculture will thrive if the world is warming. But now we fix that. Climate change is not global warming, not the same. It's not just getting warm, it's getting more dramatic weather and getting irregular El Niños, more frequent El Niños, and all these ocean circulations are being disturbed. And Fiji, South Pacific. So these are some of the newest scientific research results, trying to map out who is most vulnerable. So everyone is most rich, the richest country, the most wealthy, the wealthiest countries are same as the least developed. Caribbeans, Southeast Asia, as well as Europe. And we don't have the United States on this list, but nevertheless, certain parts of the United States, if we break countries down, Florida is going to face a lot of sea level rising problems. California is increasingly having wildfire. Equally bad as Australia, we had a horrendous wildfire, bushfire in Australia, 2019, right before the pandemic. All the billions of animals died. And it's not just the magnitude of these wildfires, bushfires, but the frequency of such fire. So science, as well as energy number, as well as economic data, are talking about a different scenario in terms of both the input into climate change, as well as the impact of all of these data are presenting a different scenario by the time of 2015 compared with 1990s. This is just another map, which I just spoke, which I will just skip now. So, introducing IR explanations. First one is called a rational institutionalist explanation. Climate change in 1990s was very much a remote challenge. A challenge that has been felt by a small group of countries and will be solved by a relatively small group of countries. Therefore, to ask everyone to jump in and collaborate would be very difficult. The political cost was too high, no incentives. Most countries back then, predicted by science as well as policy projections and expectations and estimations, most countries will be affected remotely, but more importantly, most countries are not really contributing to it. So only a small amount of countries will determine the future of climate. So we face a very diverse world, and without a central authority, with very little global governance infrastructure building up in the climate field, it's better to form small clubs. Form small clubs. Ask maybe just OECD countries to take the lion's share of responsibility, to take a lead in climate collaboration. We'll see slow and incremental progress and sometimes very shallow cooperation. Later on, by Paris Agreement, now, many things remain the same. The world is as diverse as before. However, the experiences of climate impact climate-related disasters are increasingly being shared. Delegation from Philippines giving an emotional speech can inspire many people in the audience, or the people in the audience fully can relate to his sadness and frustration. Because delegations from Caribbean countries, from African countries, from other parts of Asia equally felt the disastrous outcomes of melting glaciers, flooding, sea level rising, ocean water intrusion, dramatic weather, frequent El Nino global phenomenon. So all of these now are increasingly being shared across borders. So the world remains diverse in terms of cultural, but in terms of climate experiences, finally are coming together a bit more. And now we have a longer history of UNFCCC, UNEP, and COPs. We have more rules. We're more aware of these rules. We finally can talk about maybe we don't need one single leading state. Maybe we have many, many leading states. Maybe some countries like Indonesia can lead in terms of tropical forest restoration. Countries like South Pacific countries can lead, instead of just receiving, can lead in terms of designing mass, large-scale climate immigration and become the largest or become the most suitable advocates for international law on climate refugees. Countries like India, China can lead in terms of renewable energy. China and India now are largest manufacturers of wind and solar panels. Countries like Europe can lead in terms of recycling economy, carbon sink technology, efficient, smart electricity grid. Countries like China can lead in electronic cars. Countries like Brazil can lead in terms of ecological conservation. So countries can take lead in different dimensions because of this 50 or 30 or 20 years of accumulation of experiences and institutional building. So now we are not entering a new land of climate governance. We do have accumulated knowledge of how to build agreements, how to do collaborations. So according to the rational institutional building is critical for international cooperation. Today and tomorrow's climate cooperation depend on yesterday's institutional building. And in terms of institutional building, we have something to stand. We're no longer empty-handed. We have some failures with Kyoto Protocol, but at least Kyoto Protocol made a lot of governments excited about climate change in 1990s. And the Kyoto Protocol generated a generation of energy experts, carbon emission experts, that now spread all over the world. They went back to their home countries and designed their sovereign, their climate, domestic climate teamworks, domestic climate funds, domestic climate policy negotiating teams. So things are being accumulated, knowledge being accumulated. With this is the rational institutional explanation that the first 30, 40 years of climate cooperation can be shallow, can be slow, can be very much centered around the hegemony. Everything was very much hinged around the United States and the EU. But now we might be entering a different era where these institutions can spread out, more leaders can emerge, the issue area is much more complex, different states, even non-state actors, can take a lead. World Wildlife Fund has been taking lead in developing golden standards for climate adaptation for wildlife, preserving special fauna, mammal, flora, plants, endangered plants, and ecosystems. And very soon I will talk about youth movements. Certain movements can take a lead in terms of generating pressure. The youth movements can be criticized for not having enough expertise or not doing enough in terms of projects on the ground. But nevertheless, let's think about it. They're the ones to generate heat. They're the ones to put governments on their toes. They're the ones to make the noise. They're the ones to shake us and ring the bells. So maybe the youth movements can be the champions of generating pressures, of keeping us not too relaxed. Time is running out. Keep us a little bit worried. This is one school of thought led by Robert Keoham, David Victor. And they draw upon a lot of literature by Elinor Ostrom, many other IR scholars, but I think many of you probably have read Robert Keoham, who was the leading scholar to open the second field of IR, the international political economy, who also spearheaded the concept called interdependence. So he moved on to study climate towards the end of his career. And read this. I think I've also sent this reading to you. It's only 6 pages. Very good. It's a good summary of this entire school of thinking on climate change, how to explain the progress, how to explain the regress, how to explain solutions to climate change. A different perspective, which is the globalist perspective. This school of thought in the international relations field moves away from the state-centric system and emphasizes the complex and transnationalized and globalized nature of international, including climate change, but also pandemics, global health, migration, non-traditional security, and more. So for traditional IR, which you probably all know, the structural realists and neoliberal institutionalists, these IR schools of thought emphasizes states are the sole and the most relevant actors in international relations. Now, the globalist school of thought thinks that's counterfactual. The world is political for sure, but the world is more than just a political world. The maps are artificial because political borders are artificial, which means political borders are determined by human beings and societies and governments. But in the real world, rivers cross borders, forests cross borders, birds fly cross borders. Bad temperature does not know borders. Flooding does not know borders. Disasters have no borders. Lakes borders with many, many countries. And when lakes are polluted, it affects all the bordering countries. When forests shrink, we have bad micro ecosystems and effects many, many countries. Mountains go across borders. the glacier can melt, and the water comes from both sides. So in the real world, the ecological borders do not coincide with political borders. Or in fact, the planet has no borders. The planet is one coherent, integrated ecosystem. And in that sense, we are truly interconnected. We are truly interconnected. We're deeply interconnected. And that interconnectedness cannot be disturbed, stopped by political wills. Even if we have war, even if we have trade war, trade blockage, we have economic sanctions, we have diplomatic blockage, we have laws preventing migrants, laws preventing human beings swim across river, ocean to land. If we have all of that, we're still interconnected. It's part of one single planetary system. So given that, this particular globalist school of thought argues that this particular nature of the planet determines the condition for interstate negotiations, for fundamental dynamics in international politics, particularly in such fields like climate change, health and pandemics, natural disasters, migration, non-traditional security, because in all these fields, political boundaries do not coincide with the borders of the province. Cultures don't have particular, honestly, cultures are fluid. Cultural practices can be practiced differently from political practice. People live across country borders might practice the same languages, same religions, same holidays, same customs, similar folk songs and dances. Therefore, these people connected, and therefore non-traditional security, human security for these communities are connected. I don't have a map here for you today, but I usually have one. It's a map of cultural groups versus vis-a-vis political borders. There's a serious political, not a joke. It's, for somebody who lives in Uzbekistan to go to work in the morning, sometimes they have to pass borders 9 times. He's still, by the end of his destination, by the time he gets to his office, he's still in Uzbekistan, but he has to cross borders 9 times because he had to go through a highway that crosses Tajikistan and Kazakhstan. So in the Fernagan Valley, the borders are so intertwined that for a single individual to go to work in the morning, you're crossing multiple borders. Borders are there, but communities are spread. For Indonesia, certain cultures probably do not cross waters. So you have different islands may practice different cultures. But on Java, on Sumatra, communities cross different provincial or even sub-political borders. And human security cross political borders. And one core assumption and argument raised by this globalist school of thought is the incongruences between political borders and the boundaries of shared problems, which causes the stalemate in intergovernmental negotiations and the insufficiency of international cooperation. In addition, the School of International Relations thought highlights the importance of non-state actors and the chain brought up by them. Because the UN system is designed to accommodate only states, all the agreements signed by only states. All the problems are being solved by states, but in fact, the problems are beyond the states. This left a huge space, maybe invisible to non-experts, but you are all IR students. There is a huge gap left open for non-state actors to play a huge role. And these are the space that is out of UN's monitoring capacity, out of federal government's capacity, out of provincial governments. Because these space are transborder boundary. This space can be also very disheartening. It's so-called nobody wants to. Or peoples without nations. There are lots of human communities, millions of people with no passports because no government wants to take them, or they want their own government, but every other government refused to let them to do that. Because there are a huge amount of states in human societies on this planet are left out the formal UN system. But in fact, these are spaces where problems become acute and lots of non-state actors emerge and have to deal with. So I give you a list of scholars. You can look into them and check their most distinguished scholarship. James and Rosenau, who wrote so-called Turbulences in the International System. Oren Young, who's still very active, who's a leading scholar of global environmental politics, who formed Arctic University, who really works on almost all topics related to global environment. Ronnie Lipser, he wrote a book on power in the world, who challenges traditional IR definitions of power and statehood. Margaret Keck, who works a lot on transnational environmental movements, and Peter Wapner, global environmental services. For this group of scholars, their scholarship can explain both the success and the relative failure of international collaboration in the field of climate change. It is successful in a relative sense because no matter what, in the past 50 years, majority of state governments have been mobilized, signed treaties, and become involved in the Paris Agreement. But the relative failure is that the current UN system just insufficient. We talk about diversification of leadership in climate leadership. This group, scholars would argue, we need to even diverse beyond that. We need to really let non-state actors to become champions as well. I'll give you one example, such as Cities Alliance. It's becoming very effective, made a lot of progress, and becoming increasingly very visible in climate governance and collaboration. It is a global partnership. It's not an organization or a government. It's a partnership, fighting urban poverty and supporting cities to deliver sustainable development. So to incorporate a lot of concepts in the field of climate and try to start quickly adaptation as well as mitigation. To manage its activities, the Cities Alliance operates a multi-donor fund with UNOPS. UNOPS is a special agency of the UN, which doesn't do the real work, but as a guarantor. So this organization is affiliated with that UN as a host entity. So members, currently 29 diverse members, provide strategic direction, contribute to the financing of the fund, and they engage in advocacy and operational activities to realize sustainable development all over the world. Who are they? Who are they? 29. A third of them are governments from Latin America, Europe, Africa, and the United States, North America. 9. A lot of local authorities. Interesting. C40. Has anyone heard of C40? C stands for cities. These are 40 cities voluntarily got together for more than 20 years. 40 cities across the globe. Quickly check if Jakarta is part of it. I know Seoul, South Korean capital city, is part of it. A couple of countries from America and Europe. But there are non-European, non-American cities. These are totally city governments. They don't get money or budget from their bosses, federal governments. They're coming together as if there's a sisterhood across these cities. And they have a network. And then they collaborate, they get together, share technologies, they have a dialogue, and they do climate activities together. And a couple more such metropolises, another network of cities and local governments, different types of local government. So there are 5 different networks of cities across the globe. These are purely networks of local governments who are interested in learning about climate change and coping with climate change together. Non-governmental organizations. So we have AVSI, Habitat. Habitat has a lot, I think probably you heard about, because Habitat does a lot of work in Asia. They do nature conservation. So there's a lot of adaptation activities. Traditionally, they work on human-nature conflicts, try to help communities in Vietnam, communities in Sumatra, Java, to deal with wildlife issues and ecotourism. Rio, this is a forestry-related NGO, 2 more. Multilateral organizations, UNICEF, UN Habitat, UN CDF, and the World Bank groups. These are mega international organizations. Private foundations, the Ford Foundation. Or maybe, you should Google it and find out which foundation is that. And some universities. So there are the Uramus University is actually a network of university, covers a lot of university campuses. This is a very diverse group. And then they do real work. They identify most vulnerable spots, hotspots across the globe, and they work with communities. And there are other types. I promised you to talk about the youth. There are other types of non-governmental actors. Some of them are not necessarily popular. They're popular among youth, and they're becoming really, I think some of them are seen as troublemakers by governments. Extinction Rebellion, I don't know if you have heard of it. Some of you, if you traveled abroad, you might have heard of them. They are predominantly youth, young people, and they do dramatic activism. I don't have a picture. I thought I have. So recently what they did is they grew their hands into the world's most famous paintings, such as Mona Lisa or Botticelli's Three Springs, or beautiful architecture, sort of sculptures in Italy. So they grew their hands into world famous arts, which is very, could annoy many, many people, but use that dramatic activism to again express this frustration on the young generation and to urge current politicians to do fast, to implement fast. Now we're coming to not the end, but the really important section. What about Indonesia? I've asked you to read a report that identifies some of Indonesia's climate vulnerabilities. I don't know if you have a chance. Think about Indonesia. Think about Indonesia in the broader context of climate change. Also, think about Indonesia applying either the rational institutional approach, which emphasizes, all countries have their own interests. All countries have their own priorities. All countries face their own different disasters. So you've got to continue to do the slow work to make sure all governments gradually coming together, speak similar policy languages, and interact all the time, meet, belong to a, sign up for agreements, learn how to work together. Or the other one, globalist, emphasizes that we need to have more than just government. You can think about that. And then think about Indonesia. Due to a combination of political, geographic, and social factors, Indonesia is recognized as vulnerable to climate change, ranked 97 out of 181. Now, you're gradually becoming master students. You have to have a social scientific mindset. What does this mean? 97 out of 181. Is Indonesia high risk? Is Indonesia low risk? Farik, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think Indonesia is high risk because we're way more than the 50%. We're the higher 50% of the thing.
It's becoming, but Indonesia is roughly still in the middle. Roughly in the middle, exactly in the middle, which makes Indonesia is a great case. So if you're really extreme, okay, Philippines. So whatever happens to Philippines might not be relatable by the rest of the world. Or if you are really, let's say, Russia, which is not going to, which is not going to suffer as much as the rest of the world. But Indonesia's experience probably represents a lot of countries. You have a lot of dramatic things, but at the same time, you have other signs telling you you might have still this window of opportunity. This makes Indonesia very good for research. So I encourage you to not just assume that, we need to study other countries. This is, again, Indonesia's local wisdom comes into picture. If Indonesia can solve or can figure out something about climate change based on local wisdom, maybe this is applicable to the rest, to majority of the countries, which are sort of in the middle in terms of climate. Yes, but Farik is right in terms of it's a little bit above 50%. So I think it's like 40, in between 45% to 50. Country ranks 100 countries, you use a different kind of, so this is, but there's a very disconcerting is that Indonesia's risk level has deteriorated very fast since 15 years ago. So around the first, or from middle 1990s to 2000s, or even all the way to 2005, Indonesia's risk vulnerability level was still sort of, in a sense, less vulnerable. This is what I meant earlier on. I talked about Southeast Asia was not identified as a high risk vulnerable climate region, okay? But in the recent 15 to 20 years, it's becoming more visible in terms of climate vulnerability. And this table, table 4, included in the document, it's the most recent climate risk assessment of Indonesia document I have uploaded for you. It sort of ranked Indonesia's most relevant natural disasters for Indonesia. Flood, not so. Flood, sorry, it's very, very major because a global average is 4.5, but for Indonesia is 8.1. So the risk for Indonesia to suffer from flooding is way above global average. Cyclone, same. Drought, average. Vulnerability, as I said, is overall vulnerability is average. Coping capacity, average. Overall informed risk level, roughly average. So in a way, yes, Indonesia will witness disasters, but overall Indonesia's coping capacity is okay. And as well as the overall vulnerability is not as acute as some of the neighboring countries. So give Indonesia a bit of a window of opportunity, but nevertheless, I wouldn't encourage everybody to take a nap. I don't think it's time for a nap. I think this is the time to hurry up because this window of opportunity is rare and can disappear. But it's slightly less gloomy and devastating. For some countries, there is no such a window of opportunity at all. But for Indonesia, there is. And we need to strengthen Indonesia's coping capacity and reduce risks. Maybe there's a way for Indonesia to come out of this whole big challenge as a winner. So I really cannot wait for you to break into smaller groups and then come back to me. And finally, I won't be speaking just by myself. I have two questions for you when you break into smaller groups. One is, what do you think about the level of participation of Indonesia in global climate politics and government? High, medium, low? When you come back, give me one answer. Second, which role do you think should Indonesia play in the future? Leader, good citizen, suspicious outsider, recipient of assistance, or innovator? You discuss, you tell me what you think. And as the potential members of the younger generation of Indonesian leadership, what would you pursue in terms of the role played by Indonesia in future climate politics? Farik, what do you think? Should we break into groups? And
Actually, after this, we'll have an event scheduled by the MC. So for the moment, we'll give the mic to the MCs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Fenshiu, PhD, for the very insightful presentation. I really can't wait for the further discussion with Mrs. Fenshiu.
Yeah, the presentation is really great. We are really focused enjoying the presentations until we forget that we've been here for almost 2 hours in this room. I think we need some kinds of relaxations to refresh our minds so that we can be ready and prepared for have a great discussions after this.
I agree. Let's play some games, Aul.
Okay, for Mrs. Feng Sibu, you can take some break now or maybe join us for playing the games together. And for the participants, be ready because we're going to play a game together. Okay, sure. So the games is Zoom It In Food Editions. So next. So what we're gonna do in this game, so we're gonna guess the Zoom picture with the food editions. With the game mechanism, first, look at the picture carefully and then write down the name of the food, or maybe you could raise your hand so you can answer the answer directly to us, and the names should be in the correct spelling. And the third mechanism, there are 2 rounds. First round is easy with the 1 point, and also the medium round with 2 points. And the last mechanism, the person with the most points wins the games. So here we're gonna play the games. Are you ready, Sukri, for playing this game together?
Sure, I do ready. And I guess all the participants here are ready too.
Okay, so let's start with the first round, easy level. Okay, we can go to the first picture. So, wow, how about this food, Sukri? Do you like it?
Yeah, I like this, but it's not my favorite food for almost the time. I guess most of the kids like it.
Yeah, I think kids do like this food. So maybe for the participant who knows the answer can raise your hand or maybe type the answer in the chat box. Okay, we have the answer here from Sophie Yasmin Indonesia. It's donut. So yeah, remember the participant, the name of the food should be in the correct spelling. So I hope everyone type the answer of the food in English. So yeah. Okay. Wow, everyone is already answered. Should we see the answer, Sukri?
Yep, the answer is,
Okay.
yeah, the answer is donut.
Yeah, it's donut. Okay, so
Okay, move on to the second picture. Wow, this food is from Japan, right? And I think it's human favorite food in the world.
yeah, right. Actually, I like this food so much, especially with the candy rolls. Okay, we can see the
Okay, let's see the
answer.
answer.
Okay. Okay, the participants already typed the answer. Let's see, is it right, Susie, or not? Let's see.
The answer is
Yeah.
sushi.
Yes, the answer is Susie. Okay, yay. So let's see the next one. Wow, look at this food. I think this food is often being as a breakfast food for every people, I guess, right? With the honey over it. Yeah, it looks so delicious. So let's see the answer. Okay, what is it, Sukri? Yeah, it's pancake. Okay, so yeah, most of the participants are correct. Yeah, the answer pancake. Okay, so how about if we move to the next picture? Oh, actually, I never tasted this food before, but it seems so delicious with the topping and also the mayonnaise and the sausage in it. It looks so delicious. Everyone have tasted before?
Right now.
Yeah, it's okay. You're not the only one who feels hungry because I feel hungry too right now. So let's waiting. Okay, let's see the answer for Sophie Yasmin. It's hot dog. Okay, wait. For Sophie, can do you available for open your mic right now? Why do you think that this is the hot dog? We need your answer, maybe.
Yes, because I think it's specific bread. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I see, but lots of food are using bread. So do you sure the answer is hot dog?
Yes.
So let's see the correct answer, Sukri. Is it right or no?
Okay, let's look up the answer.
Okay, the answer is hot dog. So let's moving on to the next round.
Okay, this is the last picture
Oh, yeah.
and easy level.
I think this looks like a biscuit, but it's not crispy at all. It looks so soft. So what do you think it is, Sukri? Maybe we could check the answer of the participant. Wow. Andy Anugrah answer it's macaron. Hello Andy, do you available for use your mic? Why do you think this is a macaron?
Yes, can you hear my voice?
Yes, audible.
I think it's macaron because, yeah, it's macaron just like in the picture.
Are you sure it's macaron? Because maybe,
Yes,
yeah, it can be something food else. I mean, else.
I totally believe that the answer is macaron.
Okay, are you sure for 100% or maybe
Yes.
70%?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, 100. Deal. Let's see the answer. Sukri.
Okay, let's just look up the answer.
Yeah, 100 point for Adi. Thank you for the correct answer. So yeah, let's moving on to the next picture. Okay, this is the round 2 with the medium level. So I hope everyone can be ready because I think this level is kind of hard to guess. I guess agree. Yep. So let's see the first picture at the medium level. Okay, look at this food, look at the topping, so yummy, and I guess I'm gonna eat this food after this.
Yes, how about we order this?
Okay, deal, but I think before we order this food, let's see the participants' answer.
Okay.
Hi, everyone answer it's pizza. Are you sure it's pizza, everyone? Not anything food, else food? Okay. Okay, we see. Yeah, it's nasi goreng. Everyone agree that it's nasi goreng? It can be nasi goreng because I think it's the egg, right? Wow. Okay. So the ones who answer pizza, do you still believe with your own answer? Is it pizza or maybe fried rice? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's pizza. So great. So yeah, it's okay. Maybe you can make your own fried rice with egg after this event. And okay. Okay, we can go to the next picture. So great.
Okay. Well, look at this food is that almost found by plankton most of the time, right?
Yeah, we all know that plankton try to steal this food every time from Mr. Crab. So
Yeah.
what is it? Oh my God, everyone is already answering burger. Wow, do you wow. Yeah, they are to answer burger and Krabby Patty. So let's see. We already give you a hint by Plankton and Mr. Krabs. So do you still believe it's your own answer? It's burger or maybe Krabby Patty? Yeah, you can make sure in your questions. Okay. So should we see the answers, agree?
Okay, let's see the answer. Yeah.
Yep, it's burger. So sorry for the Krabby Patty. Maybe we can make our own Krabby Patty after this. Okay, should we next to the picture in okay. So yeah, they are best friends in restaurants. So I think everyone, when they order the burger, they often not forget to order this food. Okay, let's see. Let's see the answer. Okay. Hello, Fanny. Are you available to open your mic? Why do you think this is French fries?
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Because the picture is familiar and we can find it everywhere in every corner of the cafes and restaurant, and it's the easiest menu for us to order.
I see. Are you sure with the answer French fries? Or maybe it can be something else food, maybe?
I'm 100%.
Okay, 100%. How's agree? Funny. Sure, it's French fries for 100%. So
Okay.
maybe we could see the answer?
Okay, let's look out the answer.
Yeah. Let's see the answer.
Yeah, the answer is French fries.
Yay! Congratulations for everyone who answered French fries. So I think it's not hard like Sucre. I think this is easy for everyone.
Really easy.
So yeah, so I hope for the next picture it's very hard. I hope so. Oh, calm, Andy. It's not the next picture, so calm. Okay, here. Look at this food, Sucre. The chocolate is already melted. I think it looks so delicious.
Yeah, it smells. How if we directly see the answer?
Wait, I think we should wait for the participants' answer. Okay, everyone answer with waffle, croffle, Nutella. Wow, Nutella bread, waffle. Okay, maybe for Novidia Arisanti, they available for open your mic. Tell us the reason why you say it's a waffle.
I just see the chocolate there, and there are some crispy.
Are you sure? Because I think it can be a chocolate banana biscuit. Are you sure it's a waffle? Maybe we could see the other answer. Okay, it's wow, it's Jujur. Hello, Fedi Hakim. Why do you think it's Jujur? Yeah, the Jujur with the innovations, the top with chocolate over it. Wow. Hello, Fanny.
Yes.
Hello, why do you think it's a Jujur?
The color is brown and it's some crispy outside. So
Oh, wow.
probably
I see. So the Jujur with chocolate over it. I think it's a good innovations. Everyone will likes it. So how if you see the answer quickly, Sukri?
Okay, let's see the answer.
Okay, ding ding, it's waffle. I'm so sorry for the Jujur and also for the milk chocolate and Nutella. I'm so sorry for croffle too, because it's the best answer is waffle. Okay.
Okay,
So
let's move on to the last picture.
yes. Be ready because this is the last picture. Okay, everyone can answer it quickly.
Look at the picture, look at the cheese, bread, egg, and the meat also. It's a perfect combination, right?
Yes, right. Looks it's so delicious. Oh my god, I think I'm gonna eat all food in this game. Look at the egg and the meat and also the bread. Whoa, everyone answer it's sandwich. Is it right, Sukri? I think yeah, it's not only the sandwich that have the few like this. Because I think every food have their own combinations with also the egg. It can be like roti tawar with maybe the own combinations of egg, meat. Wow, you can see the answer is wow. Lupang isi keju and then one answer pecel lele. What do you think, Sukri? Yeah, I think because this is the last picture, so maybe we can wait for the correct answer for everyone to answer the right end. Okay, everyone answer it's sandwich, triangle burger. Yeah, it can be a triangle burger, I guess, but with the triangle form, not the oval. So, oh my god, it's already the answer.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a sandwich.
Okay, so the answer is sandwich. So yeah, okay, everyone is already answer, and yeah, this is our relaxation. So I think Yeah, we have a clear mind again after this game. So yeah, actually we have count the point of every participant. So maybe we can announce who is the winner. Okay, so based on 10 questions from the easy level and also the medium level, so we can announcement the winner is, okay, jing jing jing. I will make my own deck sound because the COVID didn't prepare. Yes, so the winner is jing jing jing. Who is agree?
Yeah, the winner is Sophie.
Congratulations, Sophie Yasmin. Congratulations for being the best one to answer the questions of the food. I hope you don't order all the foods in this game, right? After this. Okay. Thank you so much for participating, everyone. So I hope everyone can enjoy this game. So, because the game sessions already end, so I think we can move to the next session, Sukri.
Okay, let's move to the next session. It's Q&A session. Thank you, Komit, for the game. It's really refreshing. I think our friend and us are ready to have a good discussion with Mrs. Feng Shiwu right now. Before we begin, let me inform that this Q&A session will be an open forum for everyone who like to discuss anything regarding to the class topic. For the all students who would like to ask, you may raise your hand and wait until the moderator give you chance to speak, and you may deliver your question or opinion. Students are also able to deliver the question through the public chat box in our Zoom meeting.
Yes, this Q&A session will be worthwhile chance because all the students have the chance to have a direct discussion with our SM speaker, Mrs. Feng Siwu. Without further ado, let me pass on the screen back to our respectable moderator, Mr. Muhammad Faik, for guiding and leading us in the Q&A sessions. For Mr. Faik, the screen and time are yours now.
Thank you, everyone. We will we'll start the question and answer session. But as Professor Feng Shiwu has given us a discussion question, which is, what do you think about the level of participation of Indonesia in global climate politics and governance, high, medium, low? Which role do you think Indonesia should play in future climate governance as leader, active participant, outsider, fund recipient, or innovator? So would there be any volunteers to answer their opinions about this discussion question? Please raise your hand or speak directly to your microphone. If there are no reactions, I'm going to pick one of you to answer these two questions, and then you can ask your own question for Professor Feng Shui. Let us pick one person to answer this question. Sophie Yasmin, could we have your opinion on these two questions? What do you think about the level of participation of Indonesia in global climate politics and governance? And what role do you think Indonesia should play in future climate governments? Oh, she's not here anymore. Oh yeah, we have a question from Fani Hakim. Please direct your question.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I'm not gonna ask a question. I'm just gonna try to respond these questions. May I?
Yes, of course. Please do.
All right. Okay, so in my opinion, Indonesia participation in global climate politics and governance is medium to high because Indonesia plays a role in climate change issues, and sometimes Indonesia able to provide solution on global carbon absorption and oxygen emission based on the data from LHK, Ministry of Environment, Indonesia. And recently, since Indonesia hold the G20 G20 presidency, so I think Indonesia tried to formulate the solution for not only global warming or global climate politics issue, but also the sustainable development. And which role do I think should Indonesia play in a future climate governance? Indonesia can be a leader, can be an active participant, and can be an innovator because since Indonesia has so many local or customary communities that provide or has have their wisdom, their knowledge about managing the environment, and how they have their own way to keep the environment in the their own natural conditions. So I think yeah, as Ms. Fang Shu also mentioned in her presentation about the indigenous religion paradigm, we can promote the paradigms to act on this global climate. Thank you. That's it.
That's a very interesting opinion. So Indonesia should in the future place emphasis on maybe the local as well as their international activism. We have another question. We have another input from Shamira Alaidrus. Indonesia has participated in the Paris Agreement, so the level of participation is still medium to low, actually. If possible, Indonesia is possible to become an active participant if Indonesia were to improve its participation. So, Shamira Alaidrus, would you mind clarifying what do you mean by improve its participation? Like, what sort of governmental things should the Indonesian government undertake, or what actions should Indonesia do according to you, Shamira? Okay, I guess we can return to you after this. So we'll go to Swari Utami Dewi. Yes.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of the meeting. Sorry for not being on cam. So I'd like to answer both of questions. Is it possible?
Yes, of course.
Okay. The first one, I think that the level of participation of Indonesia in global climate politics and governance is medium to high. Why I said so? Because in relation to the policy, the participation is high because right now, as far as I know, that Indonesia has several changes of politics that are really pro global climate politics, such as about the follow, about the netting, about the participation of people in social forestry and so on, so on. But in terms of practices, it should be more improved. So I think that the level is medium to high. So it depends on the, the way you see. And for the second questions, which role do you think should play? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Actually, we can play for all of those things except outsider. Because why? Because I think that Indonesia right now, because here we are talking about Indonesia, not about the Indonesia government. So if we are talking about Indonesia, Indonesia has various or many parties or stakeholders. So for example, if we are talking about the role of government, it means that the role of the government, they should become leader. But if we are talking, for example, about the social activism or about the NGO, they should be become active participant. But if we are talking about society, it could be fund recipient or active participant. And if we are talking, for example, about academicians or university, for example, they become innovators. So the answer really depends on the background, where you're from. That's all. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Miss Swari Utami Dewi for answering. So according to Miss Swari Dewi, the changes in climate politics indicates that Indonesia's participation is medium to high, at least. But in terms, this is in terms of law, but in terms of practices, it should be improved. So medium to high, but it should be improved in terms of practices. In terms of the second question, Indonesia, so we welcome Prof. Feng Shiwu again. We were still discussing your questions. Yes?
All right, good.
Yes, we were discussing your question. So there was an answer from Miss Swari Dewi. The answer was, according to her, in terms of law, because of the changes in climate politics and the participation in forestry initiatives, etc., Indonesia's participation is medium to high. But Ms. Shari criticized that in terms of law, it's moving forward, but in terms of practices, it should be more improved. So the practical consequences of law, of all these new laws that serve to protect the environment is still quite dubious. And as for the second question, which role do you think Indonesia should play in future climate governance? At the moment, according to Ms. Shari, Indonesia still plays the role as an outsider because Indonesia still has various parties and stakeholders. If we are talking about the role of the government, not Indonesia as a whole, but the role of a government, then they should become leaders. But if you go to a social activism level, if you go to the social activist, then Indonesia should play, those social activists should play a role as an active participant.
Very interesting. Hans, I think the video part of my Zoom stopped working.
Oh, that's fine, Professor.
Yeah, that's why that's why I couldn't. I appreciate these answers, and I appreciate there's a little bit of a debate among students. That's all very good. and I'm surprised, but I'm not in disagreement in a way, but I appreciate all sort of the straightforwardness as well, that you see Indonesia still as an outsider. Could accept, you think, accept that, yes, the sort of the non-state actors side is limited, but I would like to hear a little bit more why some of you think Indonesia still is very much an outsider. Accepted outsiders. Oh, everything accepted outside. Did I hear?
Yeah, sorry, can I revise that? So what I
Yes,
meant
please.
is the role of Indonesia, because in Indonesia we are having various.
I think we lost the
Sorry,
voice.
because we are having various stakeholders, so it depends on the role and the condition of the stakeholders. Actually, we can do any of the participation except outsiders. And right now, for example, in terms of government should become kind of leader. But for example, social activism or like NGOs and so on, they become active participation. But for a community, they could be, for example, fund recipients. And for academicians, they probably become kind of innovators. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you give me some good examples of innovation or being an innovator? What do you think, which in which fields Indonesia can be an innovator, for example?
So for example, right now, because we are having a kind of traditional system for this is for example, right now Indonesia has a kind of traditional knowledge or traditional systems that combines the ways to conserve forests, but still produce a kind of agroforestry. And from the point of view of academician, because of the research has been proved that the way farmer and community in Indonesia in managing forests, it's really contribute to the better forest management in terms of agriculture or agroforestry. So that's a kind of innovation really need to be boosted or to be promoted by the academician, because by having a kind of a strong result base by academician or university people, they can be a more resilient, they can be more proud when they really do kind of practices.
You think not enough?
Sorry?
Not enough to be promoted yet by academics.
They're only one of an example.
Thank you. The local wisdom in agriculture and forestry conservation, sort of combining local wisdom as well as climate science, or maybe top-down climate discourses, and promote local management or traditional ways of managing forestry, and as a better way to make forestry more, and forestry communities, I guess, more resilient to climate challenges. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Any other fields that you think, other than forestry, is there any other field Indonesia can potentially become, the Indonesian experience can be sort of broadly learned or be broadly promoted? Anyone else?
Shamira Alaitris mentioned that Indonesia, their answer was Indonesia has participated in the Paris Agreement. So this participation, according to them, is still medium to low, actually. And Indonesia, it is possible for Indonesia to become a more active participant if Indonesia were actually to go ahead and improve its participation in those kinds of agreements. But according to Shamira, the participation is still medium to low. Maybe Shamira Alaidris could expand on this answer. Oh, unfortunately, I think the participant got disconnected earlier, actually.
Or maybe anyone else? Does anyone here have some experience in participating in local government's implementation of Paris Agreement, or have been anyhow involved in the sort of setting up national goals, self-determined national goals?
Actually, I've participated in a number of local social mapping initiatives. So we were sent. This was not at the behest of the government, but at the behest of local corporations. So corporations, large corporations who wanted to have their corporate social responsibility in terms of preventing or mitigating the effects of climate change. So we had a project in Cilacap, which is East Java. We went to a coastal community where the main problem was fisheries, because fisheries and rising seawater levels, because there was seawater intrusion into the villages, and also the fishery stocks were not being replenished as quickly as it was being fished. So the fishermen had to increasingly go out in open waters and choppy waters, in risky waters. And one of the proposed solutions was a mangrove nursery, where in order to replenish both fish stocks and also protect from potentially tsunamis, because that area is rather vulnerable to tsunamis. And unfortunately, the implementation was less than optimal, because the corporate programs, first, they did not factor in the reaction of the fisheries communities themselves. So the community was split into two, actually, between the fishermen and the local people. Fishermen, the local people wanted this mangrove nursery because it protected them and it was a good conservation effort. But unfortunately, the fisheries people, the fishermen, took a rather a spoiler kind of actor. They deliberately parked their boats in the mangrove, in the fledgling mangrove trees, and they ruined the roots of the mangrove trees. So out of 180 seeds that we planted, only 48 were able to survive their first year because of this action. So it's a bit difficult to implement these policies in a local level, because sometimes there's not enough understanding, and there is the spare time of getting as much private profit as possible, as even among the local people. So that was my experience.
Thank you for sharing it. This gives us a great deal to talk about, and gives us a really concrete local context. Mangrove has been proven to be one of the most effective natural mechanisms to prevent seawater erosion and to mitigate the impact of such as a hurricane or tsunami, potentially, all these largest scale natural disasters, because they might not have prevent it, but at least they could quickly absorb excessive water, help with the post-disaster recovery. And this is such a vivid example of very localized conflict over disaster mitigation, climate change adaptation, preparedness, because in a way, it's hard to fight against short-term cash income or potentially some sort of market opportunity. It's just so hard to fight against these forces and these very materialistic and short-term arguments. If there's a possibility that under the new leadership, Jokowi, and the new democracy building in Indonesia, because Indonesia has a long and strong history of community organization and social mobilization. In many ways, societies are capable of organizing, opposing, problematic projects. And if that can merge with some of the institutional initiatives by Jokowi's government in a way that could, combine these kind of mobilization with rule of law, anti-corruption, maybe such problematic projects or corporate behavior can be reduced in the future. Are you hopeful?
It's hard to say actually, but I am hopeful that maybe if the fishermen saw the effects of climate change, they would maybe change, hopefully.
Yeah, they will change and they will find a way to voice their concerns and find a way to affect local government, change local laws, and maybe it will be politically costly for corporations to, or those people who wants to park the boats.
Yes, and
We have a good
there
answer
is,
in the chat room.
yes, there is an opinion in the chat room where in small scale, there are a lot of communities that work on household managements. In agriculture sector, some regions have also food sovereignty programs. So perhaps those, according to Fanny, those are the sections that Indonesia could become an innovator in.
Very interesting. Could Fanny Hakim tell me a little bit more about this food sovereign projects?
All right. So yeah,
Thank you.
I conduct research recently in a community that we can call indigenous community, and they have their own method to planting their paddy and rice. So it is different from the regulation from the government that make what is it, a farmer to use like pesticide and something, but they don't use it, and they not organically but something different method from their ancestor. I'm not really sure how to call it, but they produce their rice like 3 times from the other farmers. And yeah, it's not only in one indigenous community, but that I have found it 3 communities and Kaspon Ciptagelar, and also I forgot the other names of the communities, and yeah, they made their um, food products from their farm, so in a larger scale than the other farmer. They call it a ancestor way in planting their foods.
Thank you. That's thanks for sharing this case. Very again, can be actually multi-layered. So now we have a new sort of a new actor and a new factor. So in addition to national governments, local governments, we also have autonomous self-rule communities. And indigenous population is not small and not exclusive to only, small amount of countries. In fact, many countries have indigenous, and they're very highly marginalized, but at the same time, they're at the forefront of climate vulnerability. I'm very actually pleasantly, I feel very good to hear this positive example of allowing indigenous population to continue practice some autonomy over agricultural and be able to practice some of the ancient practices leading to the, in the process of being prepared of climate change. Thank you very much for sharing this. And I do think this is another area Indonesia can contribute.
Thank you, Professor Feng Shiwu. Fortunately, the time is up, so we will give the event to the MCs for the closing. Thank you.
Good timing, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Faik, for the time, and also Mrs. Feng Siwu. So before we close the sessions of this day, I think we should documentations for our Zoom meeting. So maybe everyone could open their camera and we have the photo session together. Okay, we will wait until 1 minute. So I hope everyone can open their camera. Okay. Okay, so yeah, we're still waiting for everyone to open their camera. Okay. Okay, thank you. And for the other one, everyone wants to open the camera again. And if not, we can just go to the kiss session. Okay. Okay, maybe I will count to 3. And yeah, you can give your best smile. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, to the next slide. Okay, choose your best pose. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Okay, once again, thank you everyone for your presence. We truly appreciate. We wish you a nice day and see you at IRUD Summer Course 2022 agenda tomorrow, same with this hour.
Yeah, thank you everyone for participating, and also on the behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to apologize if we have done any mistake throughout today's sessions. Once again, we want to say thank you very much for the amazing presence and presentations from Mr. Feng Siwu, and thank you everyone for participating. Thank you. Don't forget to join the IRUD Summer Course 2 sessions tomorrow at the same hour right now. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.